Hey, so I'm going to show a mobilization of the upper ribs. And so just a quick primer. The sternum is here. Most folks know that the ribs come around from the front. They can feel their ribs here. But the ribs actually interface with the bottom of the neck, the thoracic spine, and they're really important to good shoulder, neck, and thoracic spine functioning. And so there's a joint on the back here called the costovertebral joint. Costo means rib in Latin, and so it's where the rib interfaces with the vertebrae. And so the first rib, if we follow, here's your sternum, get to the highest point, and then you follow that rib around. That first rib actually sits kind of underneath the upper trap. It passes right beneath the collarbone. And some nerves come by through that, so thoracic outlet syndrome or some nerve pain in the arms can sometimes be caused by poor mobility of the first rib. Also, if we get pain or tightness right through here when I move my head, or I feel like I'm blocked getting overhead here, so that can be some mobility deficits of the first rib. I also find that as we go down the back, the second, third, and maybe fourth ribs, those are in that space between the scapula and the spine. They're often confused for trigger points of the rhomboids. The rhomboids are a fairly flat muscle, and while there could be some trigger points in there, if we're careful with our palpation, we can often pick up these little peaks and valleys that represents the bones of the rib, and then when we push on the joints, those costovertebral joints, sometimes they can be stiff or painful. This is particularly the case in somebody with a whiplash injury or athletes such as climbers, aerialists, mountain bikers, where you're taking a fair bit of impact through the upper body. That whole area can get stiff, and that can contribute to some neck pain, some shoulder pain, a couple different issues. And so I'm going to show you how to mobilize through the ribs. It's just important to note that at any point during this, if you feel numbness, if you feel tingling, if it feels sketchy, then I want you to stop and you'll contact me or your physical therapist. But otherwise, just some tenderness working through there is okay. It might feel like you're on a classical muscle trigger point, but I want you to try to find, if you push here, some areas are going to feel firmer than others, and that potentially is where we're on the ribs. So where we're going to mobilize is top of the shoulder. We're going to come down off the neck, kind of where a collar is, and we're just going to be kind of right in this space. Here's directly top, just posterior, so just to the back. Kind of here's the back of my scapula, and so I'm just kind of right in here, and that's often a tender spot. That is the upper trap, but there's also some things below that, the first and second ribs, and so that's what we're getting to. And then we're going to go down the back between, here's the border of my scapula, and here's my spine, kind of this line between there. I have another video showing some trigger point release for the posterior shoulder here, and that's all well and good, but in this video we're really getting into the ribs. So here we go. I have a lacrosse ball, a tennis ball, and what I'm going to do is put this right in my upper shoulder. But I want to get this as high as I can without it slipping away, and I have to lift my hips to get my force kind of going down this way. So what I'm looking for is a spot that feels kind of tender or like it doesn't want to move, but then I'm going to introduce motion with my arm. And you'll feel as I come overhead that, ooh, that feels kind of tight or tender. And I'm going to just play with different angles up and around to try to get that area moving. So when the arm moves up, the first rib has to drop down. And so with the ball, we're pushing into that first rib, and then the arm is providing a mobilizing force to get some motion on there. And so I'm going to spend some time, maybe 2 minutes on this whole rib area, and I can move this ball around a little bit, just explore this whole area. There's no real wrong way as long as you're not sending any numbness or tingling. That rib kind of wraps around this whole area, and so your mileage might vary a little bit from mine about where exactly you're feeling it. So that's our first rib. Then I'm going to just move down a little bit, and now my back is kind of pinning it down. I can lift my hips a bit if I want to, but often as I get down here I don't need to. I'm between the bones of the spine and the bone of the shoulder blade, and then on the same thing, introduce motion. So that key is we're not just trying to smash this area. What we're trying to do is use the ball as the fulcrum to introduce new motion. And so I'm just kind of working all around. And it's like, ooh, right there, it feels kind of relevant. It's like, dang, that's a little tighter through that. And so I'm gonna play through that range of motion, come up here, come around. I can do some circles, take some nice big deep breaths. I wanna try and relax through this. And then I'm just gonna kind of move down to the next rib. And I might feel like that right there. And so I'm gonna come up and down. And for me, for whatever reason, this third rib is a little more tender. Again, I'm just gonna spend some time working through here to get this area moving a little bit better. So spend about 5 minutes per side if you have the time. But then I want to make sure we get these ribs moving well after we mobilize. So I'm going to do a couple things. First, I'm going to come on hands and knees, and I'm going to draw my shoulders back, and I'm going to round. So just getting some active movement through the shoulder blades, the scapula, and the ribs. And then I'm going to come into a puppy pose, thumbs up, and I'm just going to lift. So I'm getting some muscular stability around that rib area. If this is painful, you can omit this piece, but just getting some muscular stability and active motion after we do a mobilization is really important. So that's how we would get the ribs moving. I can then just do some active motions. I can see I've only done one arm here, but it's like, oh, I can get way further on my right arm now that I've just cleaned up some of that rib area. So spend some time on the ribs, particularly if you're having some shoulder pain, some neck pain, or some nerve symptoms going down into the arm. Again, not diagnosing you on YouTube, but this can be a really helpful tool.